Good morning and welcome to the Lightcast Studios for this live analysis of the employment situation, also known as the Monthly Jobs Report, a Bureau of Labor Statistics monthly report that gives us some health indication into the health of our economy. On this May 5th, 2023, I'm your host, Christopher Laney. And with a week of so much discussion around economic indicators, rising interest rates, earnings reports, adding jobs, unemployment, there's a lot to discuss. Luckily, we brought the experts to break it down for us. Please welcome senior labor economist Ron Hetrick and senior labor economist Rusha Venkudre. Ron, Rusha, welcome to the studio.
Hello.
Good morning.
It certainly has been a week. There's been a lot going on this week. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Rusha, I want to start with you. It seems like most economists were predicting 180,000 jobs, unemployment going up. Doesn't seem like that necessarily happened. What's your first reaction to this report?
I was surprised. It's funny because, I think sometimes we can believe the hype too, right? So if everyone around you keeps saying things are changing, things are going down, even like when you're looking at the data, it can be hard to stay objective when that's when you hear all around you. But really looking at these numbers, I think the labor market is stronger than I was expecting. And I think most people were expecting. The actual number of jobs added was 253,000, which is much higher than that was expected. And then unemployment went back down to 3.4%. So I think it really was kind of a big surprise overall. And then that combined with the fact that actually the estimates for January and February were revised downward. So they actually dropped 150,000 jobs they'd previously added, meaning that last month in particular was very strong. And so I think that's definitely surprising, given all the rhetoric we've been hearing.
So, Ron, I want your first reaction to this report, but also maybe a little bit more of a deeper dive. What do you think is happening in regards to the strength of our labor market when you're looking at this report?
You get the feeling, we were watching unemployment claims dropping throughout April at the same time that we're hearing all of these negative announcements. When you look at the number of people who say they're unemployed because they lost their job, that number went down in April. We are seeing a lot of re-entrants. We're seeing a lot of new entrants, yet the labor force went down. And then we had a kind of a big jump in people saying, I'm out of the labor force, but I'd like a job now. There's just, you start to wonder if the only reason why our payroll job gains aren't even higher is because there's just no one out there. 3.4%. I always try to remind people, outside of wartime, that's the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had in this country. I think just like the JOLTS report earlier in the week, we dropped down to like 9.6 million. People are like, it's the lowest it's been in a long time. And it's like, yeah, and it's still way above the 7 million that we had, prior to the pandemic. So I think we got to keep our perspective in place here. This is still a very, very strong economy.
I want you both to weigh on this next question regarding industries that you believe won or lost in this report. What surprised you? Rusha, I want to start with you. Anything that really just popped out to you?
So the industries that really won, I would say overall, we saw that there was the largest gain was in health and social services. They added about 64,000 jobs, and then followed by professional and business services, which added 43,000, and leisure, which added 31,000. And I was definitely a little bit surprised by the professional and business services number, because again, I think that's sort of where people have been expecting to see those numbers really fall. And so then to see another really strong gain there, I think was pretty surprising. And then if you look also at information, they actually only added 1,000 jobs, but again, they're still growing, right? Which is not what we thought was happening. And then particularly, I think if you look at the unemployment rates as well by industry, the unemployment rate in information is still 1.4%, which is incredibly low. And so I think I was definitely surprised by what we were seeing there.
Ron, how about you? What industries really stuck out to you?
Yeah, I tell you, there's two that really jumped out to me. Number one, construction. We had a kind of a icky month last month, and then it comes the home part. The specialty trades contractors has a really big month. There's just a lot of conversation around the housing market right now. We know housing starts have been kind of flat recently. We know median home prices have come down a little bit, but they're still 32% higher than they were prior to the pandemic. If we look at the number of active listings out there, it's still almost in recent history, it's still one of the lowest levels that we've seen. There is a lot of demand for homes. I think, to see construction companies still trying to add workers tells us that, I think these people keep trying to paint this kind of doomsday scenario, aren't really hitting it. Yes, interest rates have been going up, but the demand is there. And maybe the reason why people, haven't been able to buy, or maybe why we're not building is, there's just the home prices are still so much higher than the wage gains that we've had. The other one I want to call attention to, and one kind of personally close to me, is, of course, temporary help, which had a pretty decent loss this month, lost about 50,000 since the end of last year. And, we've always talked about this being a leading indicator of kind of where we're going. But I'm starting to wonder if maybe because we're in a situation where unemployment's going down so much, if a lot of employers are just like bypassing this kind of, well, I'm going to bring them on in a contingent fashion and just trying to secure people permanently. We could be seeing a model break. And to that extent, I just want to jam this one in here. We've had a year of interest rate increases, and the models in the past would always say that that's going to raise unemployment. And yet we've been seeing unemployment go down the past several months. So maybe we're just at a time in history where all the models that we used to use need to probably be rethought.
Rusha, it feels like a lot of eyes have been on wages specifically. What does this report tell us about wages? And was this what the Fed expected or was hoping to get out of this report?
I think so. What we saw in wages is that they did increase a little bit compared to last month in terms of the pace of growth. So, the monthly increase was 0.5% compared to 0.3% last month. And the year over year is now 4.4% versus 4.2%. And I mean, I think this sort of fits in nicely with what the Fed was hoping for in terms of saying that they needed to raise rates, right? It shows that really was the right call then for them to be making. In terms of whether or not this shows that there will be a pause in the future, I think this actually, again, was stronger than what everyone was expecting. And I think after everyone saw the JOLTS report, we thought, okay, things are slowing down. And relatively, they definitely are. But given that was 2 months ago for data, and this last month, it's almost hard to see now, given that things really do seem to be still going ahead pretty strongly.
Ron, anything that you would add on wages specifically? I know that, in a lot of the articles this week, the media was talking a little bit about wages and referencing that's one of the reasons why we have to continue to look at interest rates. Anything you would add there?
Yeah, the thing that jumped out to me today was actually that if you look at a lot of the industries that are traditionally white collar industries, their wages actually went down a little bit. If you look at those kind of, that more the lower skilled work, retail, manufacturing, restaurants, and things like that, all those wages went up. This has just been the consistent story that we keep saying is that, we are really consuming labor at the low end. And I think, we keep saying that a lot of companies feel like they're like, look, I can't do this anymore. But the wage gains kind of tell us that maybe they are still, paying competitively. And I think this is a warning to employers out there right now, especially who are employing on the lower end. There's people, maybe less than 20 years old, less than 25 years old. And they're like, you know what? I've been hearing announcements of layoffs. I'm going to start to ease up on my wages. I'm going to drop my wages down. There's no evidence that is actually going on anywhere. I think you'd find out that if you drop your wages, one of two things is going to happen. Either your quality of worker is going to go, way down, or you just will end up with no workers.
Ron, one of the other key indicators we often talk about is labor force participation. In this specific report, did you see anything change or happen with labor force participation? If so or not, what do you think is occurring?
Yeah, I think we've been seeing a nice gain in the labor force, every month pretty consistently the past several months. And now we saw this drop. And I'm going to tell you what the concern that we've had is with that, all of that wage inflation last year, there was a feeling that as people might lose their jobs, as they would get laid off, that these people would say, hey, I only jumped in because I could get these wages. And now that, I'm getting laid off, I'm good. I'm just going to drop right back out of the labor force again. So I think this is something that we also have to be very careful when you hear announcements of, well, this should cause this. And clearly the unemployment rate is not behaving that way. What's interesting is when you look at the labor force by the different educational groups, the college degreed people, you're seeing that labor force keep going up, but their unemployment rate went down to 1.9%. I mean, we're talking really low numbers for, college degreed people. So, and you're seeing kind of fluctuations occurring in the other ones, but it's just really fascinating to watch the dynamics that are occurring, throughout the various skill level of the labor pool.
I want to get to your final thoughts. Rusha, I want to start with you after going through today's report. What is your final thoughts on what you're seeing?
Just that, this is still a very, very tight labor market. The economy is still doing very well in this respect. And I think, much more than everyone even thought possible. And so I think, people will have to continue watching, but I think the Fed made the right call raising the rates earlier. And as Ron said, I think, we might be in a different world now where rising interest rates does not mean increasing unemployment. And so I think we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Ron, how about you? Your final thoughts?
Yeah, so about a month or so ago, I said we may be at a time in the first quarter where maybe that was the bottom and things could start to turn. You see the temp help decline and you go, well, this is kind of interesting. But I've been watching article after article this week. It's just been, the leading economic indicators have gone down. Oh, looks like a mid-year, recession. I think people kind of forget that to be a technical recession, it's not just about GDP going down, which by the way, it's not. It's also accompanied by a spike in unemployment. We're going the opposite way. And so even if unemployment were to go up, towards the midpoint or latter part of the year, remember, we're at a 3.4% unemployment rate. This is a crazy low rate. So you start to wonder, is that even possible? Because all of these increases, all of this stuff is just, unemployment claims just haven't been cooperating, and people have been, taking their money and kind of dropping out of the labor force. We're just in such different times. So I think the future's a little hard to predict, but I think one thing for sure is the tightness that that employers are feeling. It's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Ron Ruscia, thank you so much for this conversation. For more information about today's analysis or other Lightcast data and research on the labor market, please visit lightcast.io. Live from the Lightcast studios, we look forward to seeing you next month.